Yeah, I mean, I had to sort of hazard a guess at the sort of mid-afternoon whether or not anybody would actually leave, given that the government had said we will be starting these deportations today. And I took a guess that by the end of the piece, nobody would go. And as it turned out, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, no, totally right. Labour's words are really coming back to bite them now, aren't they? When they were in opposition, hitting out the Tories' Rwanda plan, they said it was a gimmick. It increasingly looks like this is a gimmick. They
Yeah.
said it could never be scaled up. This isn't even going to touch the size. You mentioned in your piece we have a backlog of about 120,000 asylum seekers in this country.
Yeah.
If we send back only a few dozen to France, then that is not even, a small fraction of the overall numbers coming here. And that's not even to mention the droves coming over across the channel every single week. And they also said that the Rwandans would be hit by human rights challenges. And look what we've got last night, last minute, 11th hour human rights challenges, which has mean that the migrant had to be hauled off the plane. What does that say about our legal system? This migrant came across about a month ago from France.
Yeah.
Safe country. He's been in Britain for about a month. And now suddenly there's human rights claims, which mean that he can stay. It is absolutely ridiculous.
It's
The part of
bonkers,
the
isn't
state
it?
of our legal system, I think, it just needs absolute overwhelming reform. And at the moment, it doesn't look like Labour is serious about that.
No, exactly right, because they're supposed to have got this deal done with France, which was supposed to be sort of groundbreaking, and they made a big song and dance about it. Nothing can stop it. But I spoke to a lawyer yesterday who I quote in the piece, Ivan Sampson, who basically said it's practically incoherent and legally frail, and it will end up costing the government actually a load of money defending cases in court and losing.
Yeah, and this is it. And unless you have serious reform of Article 8 of the ECHR and Article 3 of the ECHR, then these legal challenges are just going to keep on coming. It's in the lawyer's interest to do it because obviously most of them get paid to mount these challenges in the courts. And it is going to bind up the Labour government, just as it did the Tory government. I think that Keir Starmer, despite being a mass defender of human rights laws, as a former human rights lawyer himself, will eventually come to the realization that this is the only way to seriously solve this crisis. But like the previous government, they might only realize this before it's too late. And I think that there are people, even inside the Labour Party now, that are imploring No.10 to go much further, much faster, and much tougher on this migration crisis because they know it is the probably single biggest issue on which their re-election chances live or die.
Yeah.
And at the moment, it doesn't seem that has really jolted Keir Starmer and No.10 into some sort of action. They say that this will break the smuggling gang's business model. Well, it won't break the smuggling gang's business model if there is still a massive incentive to come across the channel because the numbers and the chance of you being returned is so small.
Exactly.
It's about a 95% chance that you will stay under this deal. And so if you were across the channel looking at all of the shiny benefits, hotels, perks that you can get in Britain, then you probably take those odds. And so I think the real deterrent here would be some sort of third country processing point, as other parties have said, where as soon as you land on these shores, you are detained, and within a week you are off in another country having your asylum claims processed. And until that really happens, and Keir Starmer has said he's looking at them, why is he just looking at them? Why is he not actually implementing them at the moment? Because at the moment, there's no time to lose.
Because exactly right. It was one thing for human rights lawyers to stop people being sent to Rwanda, and one thing to say it's not a safe country. But they're stopping them going to France now, and you're kind of going, well, hang on a minute. Why is France a problem? Why is that not? Why it's not a dangerous country?
No, exactly. And this has been the sort of the fast throughout the migration crisis that's gripped the country over the past 7 or so years, the fact that they are coming from this safe country in France. And you're right, the amount of sort of legal wrangling in the House of Commons it took to be able to pass a bill to declare Rwanda a safe country. No one would have thought that sending migrants back to France would be any sort of issue whatsoever. No. But, again, I don't really think it's in Macron's interest to actually try and grease the wheels on this. And you saw the French Interior Ministry a few days ago really downplaying this scheme and saying, listen, it's only very small scale, it's only for a time-limited period, so if we don't get any benefit, then we can stop it. Because I think the prospect of flights going back down to France aren't helpful to Macron, and it's not really in his interest, I don't think, by those images coming out. And so I don't think that he's being entirely helpful either. But listen, the problem is that it shouldn't even really, in the first place, I know we've got this deal, but it shouldn't even really be down to France to police our borders.
No.
And that is what most people are saying. If we're a sovereign country and an island nation, then we can stop this happening. And that is why someone like Reform UK have managed to gain a massive traction in the polls, because they are just saying that as soon as they step foot on British soil, they will be deported immediately. And I think that is what most of the country think. You could talk about lawyers, you could talk about schemes, you can talk about deterrence. When most right-minded people, and your viewers and my readers, look at this crisis, they just go, why can't we just stop it? We're an island. And that is, I think, the crux which Number 10 really need to reflect.
They do. But of course, they're very distracted at the moment, and they've been distracted for quite a long time because of the scandal now surrounding the whole Peter Mandelson situation. I want to ask you about that as well, because let me play you this. This is from Keir Starmer yesterday, unusually going out and actually giving an interview, generally all round to broadcast. And this is why he said material was not presented to him.
You say not everybody had seen every email, but people at the top of the Foreign Office were in possession of some of the very material which you say was so unacceptable.
Well, look, in retrospect, it would have been better if I had been shown the details of the material before PMQs. Nonetheless...
The bits that were in Whitehall already.
Well, in retrospect...
Why weren't you?
It would have been better if I had seen that
You must have wondered
material.
this.
Well, the team were busy trying to get answers out of Peter Mandelson, which they hadn't got answers
And you're sure
to.
they weren't just working, as it were, for Peter Mandelson, trying to protect his reputation a bit when they should have been protecting yours?
No. I've seen the questions that government officials put to Peter Mandelson. I've seen the response he gave to those.
You think he was obfuscating?
Well, what I'd just say about those questions, they were the right questions, in my view, and they were waiting for Peter to reply. So they didn't know what his reply was going to be any more than I did. But look, if you're asking me now, days on, would it have been better if more of this material had been brought expressly to my attention? Then yes, it would have been.
It sort of beggars belief that he's making an excuse that he didn't see something. He's the Prime Minister. Surely he gets the right to see whatever he wants, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, that excuse just really doesn't fly. And the timeline of the events which led up to Peter Mandelson's sacking have had to be dragged from Number 10, like blood out of the stone. And as more pieces of the jigsaw have been filled in, it gets more damning and more damning.
Right.
Keir Starmer knew when he stood at the dispatch box at lunchtime on Wednesday and defended Peter Mandelson and said he retained full confidence in Peter Mandelson. One, he knew, because Peter Mandelson gave an interview to my colleague Harry Cole, that Peter Mandelson himself had admitted that more embarrassing emails and correspondence between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein would be coming out. He also knew that the Foreign Office were in possession of those emails because Bloomberg had contacted them for a right of reply. He knew that on Wednesday morning. So why on earth, before going into the House of Commons, did he not think to ask, actually, maybe I should find out the precise nature of these emails, right, bearing in mind we already know Peter Mandelson's murky relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein? Why did he not then go and seek the actual contents of those emails before he stood up at 12 o'clock last Wednesday and said, I'm sticking by this guy? Because now the whole thing either looks like his judgment and lack of curiosity is astounding, or his advisors have seriously let him down, although, the buck stuck to the top and he can demand, like you said, to see anything he wants, or it looks like some massive cover-up in which we're really not being told the express truth of this. And so, that is, I think, really damaging. And when you make statements in the House of Commons, you have to be really careful. I know it might seem sort of trivial to everyone, but this is basically what brought down Boris Johnson. The fact that, he was economical with the truth in the House of Commons. Right. And so, these things have to be taken really seriously. And, I think good on the Tories who are actually managing to keep this going. It seems to be sort of the only cut through they've got in recent months. Yeah. But, they are actually managing to extract some answers out of the government. And, likely we're going to see a minister squirm at the dispatch box today in this 3-hour emergency debate which has been granted by the Speaker.
And there's no question about Keir Starmer's sort of inexactitude, if you want to be kind, about some of the answers he gives when he's in the Commons. I had Kemi Badenoch in here a couple of months ago, and I asked her, I said, why is it that he doesn't answer questions? And she said, quite frankly, I think a lot of the time he doesn't know the answer, and other times he just wants to sort of obfuscate and not give the right answer because it's too damning against him. And when I asked her if she thought that he was a liar, she said, yeah, that's what he is. you know. And unfortunately, that's his kind of, that's the heritage leading up to this moment. So he's now hiding behind the idea that, you know, because of the time difference, Peter Mandelson hadn't answered the questions that he'd been asked. And so he didn't have that information when he went into PMQs, which is unforgivable, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's incumbent on him now, if he wants to be transparent, to just release every single ounce of detail about this scandal. Bring forward the contents of what exactly you knew before you went into PMQs, what your advisors were telling you about what was in those Peter Mandelson emails, the assurances that government officials were currently seeking from Peter Mandelson, the exact timeline of when Peter Mandelson responded to those emails by the minute. Yeah. If you give us that information, the public can judge for themselves whether or not Keir Starmer was fully aware of what he was doing when he went into Prime Minister's questions last week. And I think that for a man who made such a play about standards in public life when he was running to be Prime Minister, when he was in opposition, always being the first out of the traps to criticise any sort of sleaze under the Tories, I think it's incumbent on him now to put his money where his mouth is and really lay down the full facts of this case so the public can judge for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what he has to do. But he's certainly not out of the woods for a while, is he?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's sort of been questions around Keir Starmer's future, many on the Labour left giving him until May, where it looks like there's going to be some pretty abysmal local elections for them across the country, but also in Scotland and Wales. It's a difficult one because I think that the Parliamentary Labour Party are notoriously quite reluctant to get rid of their leaders. They obviously tried with Jeremy Corbyn and failed because ultimately it goes down to the Labour membership. There are still, despite the soundings off from many people on the, sort of the Labour left and the soft left, there are still a lot of the Parliamentary Party which are loyal to Keir Starmer. Most of them, you know, being given now sort of government jobs, baubles, PPS jobs. You know, the sort of the bag carrier class in Parliament has never been so big because everyone's now got some sort of position to keep them sweet. And I think that is a tactic in trying to bring as many people inside the tent as possible. But there are still lots of people who are loyal to Keir Starmer. But, you know, as every scandal goes on, it just gets worse and worse. And I said this yesterday, but, you know, I think that all governments have scandals of all stripes, but it's one, how you react to it, but also they could be more forgivable if everything else was going right. Yeah. If you had a big poll lead, which they don't, if the economy was firing in all cylinders, which it's not, if illegal migration was under control, which it's not. But the fact that you have this sense of drift in terms of policy and delivery in the government just exposes Keir Starmer even more when he's hit by a scandal like this.
Yeah, absolutely right.